failing to see the devil beside you.
Oh, I see him all right.
The Governor is one of the most sadistic characters to come out of the apocalypse, and arguably the most iconic villain to come out of the show. In the times before, Phillip Blake had a family, a wife, and a daughter, Penny. After losing his wife 18 months before the outbreak to a car accident, Philip's only motivation to live lied within his daughter. Tucked away in the suburbs of Georgia, Philip and Penny had taken refuge in the town of Woodbury. Along with 17 others, Philip survived the early days and grew to take on a leadership role. As the town of Woodbury was reclaimed block by block by his ever-growing community, Philip was sitting like a king at the end of the world, and eventually anointed himself governor of the town. At some point during these early days, Penny gets bit and turns into a walker, pushing Philip deeper and deeper into the dark that is his own psyche. Our story picks up over a year into the outbreak. It's a sunny day in the wasteland as the silent landscape is broken by the sound of helicopter blades. What was left of the National Guard had been circling the countryside for months following the outbreak. Unfortunately for them, this flight would prove to be one too many. The impact is seen from miles away. Michonne and Andrea watch from afar as smoke bellows from the falling craft. After an entire winter on their own, the two have become hardened survivors, and no danger awaits them. But Andrea is sick, and absolutely anything and everything is essential if she's gonna make it. So they take off towards the crash. Unfortunately for them, they weren't the only others to see the explosion. The crash site is swarmed with men in armored vehicles as Michonne and Andrea find themselves trapped. Michonne is one of the more hardened survivors at this point in the story. A lot of people forget that she was basically on the level of the Season 5 group, skill-wise, all the way back in Season 3. The primary way she has moved across the wasteland is with the use of 2 chained walkers. By removing the jaws and arms, a walker will simply lose interest in eating people. This allowed Michonne to move amongst the dead, and in time, Andrea would join her after getting left behind by her group. As the chain walkers begin acting up at the sight of the men, Michonne swiftly takes them out. Of course, this alerts the men to their location and they are captured. And it's revealed, an old friend is a part of their group.
How's about a big hug for your old pal Merle?
Now, Merle's reintroduction into the story can be seen in 2 ways. The group is extremely accepting of outsiders and will take in those in need, no matter how abrasive they might be. On the other hand, it could be seen as a sign of danger, as we know that loose cannon Merle was in the early days. It's a fantastic way of piquing our interest in this new group. Michonne and Andrea are blindfolded and transported to another location where they are given medical attention. Here, Merle shares his journey with Andrea as they come from the same camp in Atlanta. He claims their leader, the Governor, is a good man. Michonne quickly finds this suspicious as she's having troubles grasping what Merle's definition of good is. They are soon greeted by our main man, Phillip Blake, who charismatically but sternly welcomes them into his town.
Welcome to Woodbury.
The Governor explains they are not being held hostage in their town, but are simply guests for as long as they please. He offers food, shelter, and a car for when they choose to leave. Now, Michonne's survival instincts are going off the charts as she believes this place is too good to be true, and must be hiding something as nobody in this day and age would just give away what they claim. Andrea presses the Governor on their security, but Phillip reassures her every street has armed patrols day round. It's clear Andrea is more willing to accept this place at first than Michonne, which makes sense as Andrea was shown really struggling with the thought of everything being gone in the world. So the allure of a town with a coat of paint resembling the old world would definitely have her more entranced. Merle is shown to clearly have some authority within Woodbury, as he is seen taking charge of the walkers behind the walls, a far cry from the child we see him acting like back in Atlanta. Michonne and Andrea are shown to their rooms for the night, and Michonne clearly is uncomfortable under their watch. Morning comes as the two are given a tour, revealing Woodbury has a population of 73 survivors. For this time in the show, that's by far the largest collection of survivors we've seen, and makes Woodbury feel like an anomaly across the wasteland. Now, when the helicopter crashed, all the soldiers within died instantly. All but one. A soldier named Wells was critically injured and taken back to Woodbury. Here the governor shows him medical care and decency, getting him to drop his guard and reveal the location of the rest of his troops. The governor vows to bring them in safe and reunite him with his brothers.
Liar.
The governor approaches the band of soldiers with the white flag raised. The soldiers are cautious but quickly warm up to Philip when he reveals their man Wells was found alive.
We found you too.
Michonne's suspicions were right on the money. The governor has a dark way of leading and keeps it from the public. As Woodbury's militia rolls back into town with some brand new fancy military artillery, some eyebrows are raised. But Philip assures the masses with his charm the troops were dead before they arrived. Andrea eats the story up as she's already succumbed to Philip's charm, but Michonne can see through his bullshit from a mile away and starts investigating. Now, the show has let the cat out of the bag and shown us the true side of the governor with the military massacre, and wastes no time showing us how truly demented Philip has already become. And among the tanks, we see Wells, showing Andrea and Michonne may be in more danger as newcomers than we were led to believe. Another still day falls over Woodbury as Michonne begins poking around for clues on the governor's true nature. While investigating the military trucks brought in the day previous, she notices various bullet punctures in the artillery, contradicting the governor's story of the soldiers falling to the dead. But as she presses him on it, it's like he has the perfect answer for everything. Michonne is the farthest thing from an idiot, and can see through his persona and makes it known she's onto him. Michonne desperately wants to get out on the road again and tries to make a plan with Andrea. But having drank the governor's Kool-Aid, she's in no rush to get back to eating worms, and convinces Michonne, more or less, to stay a few more days. Now, of course, Merle is curious where his brother Daryl is. He asks Andrea for the location of the farm in hopes of maybe finding his brother there, but when he approaches the governor to take a few days to scout the area, Philip shuts it down pretty hard. Now, Daryl and Merle's bond was really tight their entire lives, so Philip keeping him away from finding Daryl is going to start to plant some seeds in Merle's head for later. Now, the governor is holding a celebration to commemorate Woodbury's success, with a main event to come later that night. The brains of the governor's operation, Milton, advises Philip against the use of gas in the generators for such a novel reason, as he believes it could be put to better use studying the walkers. The good old Gov shuts this down quickly, as he's shown to believe morale is a strong factor in keeping a community functioning. While champagne's being popped in the streets, Michonne takes the opportunity to sneak into Philip's apartment and steal back her sword. While in there, she finds Philip's journal with the name Penny written obsessively across the pages. Assuming it's related to a lover, she validates her own fears of Andrea falling for him. Sneaking out the back, Michonne finds herself in the non-public areas of Woodbury, discovering a cage of captive walkers. She wastes no time getting rid of them, but after getting caught red-handed, she's confronted by the governor, who knows she broke into his apartment for the sword. Michonne presses him on who Penny was, but Philip isn't ready to give out answers. As he preaches the importance of trust in a community, Michonne snatches her sword and puts it to his neck. She backs down and is allowed to leave. Philip plays this off as not a big deal, but it's clear the incident deeply pissed him off. Philip is a smart guy and begins working at the one thing Michonne cares about in Woodbury, Andrea. He tries to get ahead of the story and gives his side first to her, attempting to sow doubt in her own friend. This somewhat works as Andrea begins trying to talk Michonne down rather than hear her friend out. Michonne wants to leave now and wants to prove to Andrea they're trapped there by the governor's orders. But when they ask to leave, the gates open. They're free to go. This convinces Andrea Michonne has just completely lost the ability to function civilly. But Michonne sees it as a power move on Philip's part. She gives Andrea an ultimatum: come or don't. And Andrea's silence speaks volumes as Michonne heads out the gates alone, severing their friendship. Andrea wastes no time taking comfort in Philip, placing her right where he wants her. Later that night, the celebration's grand finale occurs. Here we see the people of Woodbury like to indulge themselves in the more barbaric side of humanity, as they have set up the fighting pits with walkers as hazards, revealing the purpose of the caged walkers Michonne slaughtered. Andrea takes issue with this as she sees it as making light of the horrors outside the walls, but Philip views it as a way for the people to blow off steam and have a little fun. Now, after the celebrations are had, Philip sends Merle with a brigade of men to hunt down and kill Michonne, as he sees her as a loose end. Along the way, Merle and his men come across a message written in body parts: go back.
She sent us a bitergram, yo.
But Michonne is no scared prey. She was the predator all along, and as the moment presents itself, she strikes, killing 2 of the 4 men without breaking a sweat. While fleeing, however, Merle clips her in the leg with a bullet, bringing the playing field down to a more fair level. Merle and his companions chase down the hurt Michonne into a clearing where she is still able to get the jump on them. The fight is close, but Michonne manages to escape with the help of a pack of walkers. Merle's companion saves his life, and to thank him, Merle puts a bullet in his head. Why would he do that to his own man, you may ask? Well, up until this point, Merle has been Philip's dog, doing whatever he says at his beck and call, leading us, the viewers, to believe he's been tamed by a more formidable foe. But this act shows Merle looks out for himself and only himself, always. He is willing to end his own men's lives if it means a secret will be kept safe. The secret of his own failure in killing Michonne. I'm sure a part of Merle was always disloyal and only looking out for himself, but Philip declining to let him look for his brother definitely helped turn the tides in his head. He takes her dropped sword as proof of death for Philip, but fears the truth may come out without her head in his hands. But that fear is quickly absolved when on his way back to Woodbury, he stumbles across Maggie and Glenn out on a supply run. After being left by Glenn and the others on top of the roof in Atlanta, Merle is surprisingly happy to see them, to Glenn's disbelief. And to disbelieve would have been the right move, as Merle wastes no time taking Maggie hostage, demanding Glenn drive them back to Woodbury as prisoners. Luckily for them, Michonne had been listening in on the ordeal, and heard Glenn and Maggie mention their home, a prison, was a straight shot from there. With an injured leg and baby formula in hand, Michonne heads towards the prison, as staying out there, in her condition, would mean certain death. Arriving at the prison fences, Michonne locks eyes with Rick Grimes for the first time. While all this is going down, Andrea and Philip have taken the time to get to know each other and, shocker, they end up hooking up, with Merle arriving back to Woodbury with Glenn and Maggie in hand as prisoners. The time of playing house for the governor has come to an end. The cold holding chambers within Woodbury lie still as Maggie and Glenn find themselves restrained by Merle in separate rooms. Merle spends his day repeatedly beating Glenn and torturing Maggie with his screams, as he tries to get their base's location out of them. He even goes as far as to throw a walker at Glenn as he's restrained, which Glenn overcomes with sheer force. When this proves to fail, the governor takes his turn, violating Maggie, showing the disgusting dark man Philip is capable of becoming. The two remain strong through the torture, but when Merle threatens to kill Glenn in front of her, she breaks, revealing their base is located within an abandoned prison. Back at the prison, Michonne's eyes remain locked onto Rick's,
Passing out from the pain in her leg, Rick frantically fights the dead outside the fences to bring her in, with the supplies and baby formula in hand. Michonne is cold and unresponsive to Rick's questions at first, but fills them in on who the governor is after seeing baby Judith. She admits she saw Glenn and Maggie get taken back to Woodbury, and as night falls, the group heads out for an assault on the town. The governor begins to question Merle's loyalty as his own brother is a part of their group and could possibly be heading towards Woodbury as they speak. Merle, however, reaffirms his loyalty to the governor and agrees to execute Maggie and Glenn as they are nothing but loose ends now. Phillip reflects on the delicate situation by staring at his creepy-ass tanks again, and it is here we are introduced to the governor's darkest secret yet. He has kept his dead daughter Penny chained up as a walker out of fear of letting go, going as far as to brush her hair and speak to her as if she were still alive.
What's wrong with you?
This is a twisted secret that not even his closest lieutenants know about, so it really shines some light onto why Phillip wanted Michonne dead so bad after she left. But as Phillip prepares Maggie and Glenn for execution, Rick Grimes and his rescue squad infiltrate the walls of Woodbury, and as they intercept their captured friends, an all-out gunfight breaks out. As Woodbury goes on full lockdown, Rick and his companions begin fighting their way out. It isn't long before they realize Michonne has slipped away, as she has her own mission to take care of. It's nearly impossible to make out what is happening in Woodbury as smoke bombs are dropped in the streets. Andrea returns fire onto the invaders, of course unknowing that it's her old friends. And while all of this is going down, Michonne uses the cover of gunfire to sneak into Phillip's apartment on a mission to assassinate him. As she waits for the governor to return for his reckoning, she hears a faint bump in the neighboring room. Investigating the noise, she discovers the governor's dead daughter Penny chained down and restrained. Michonne knew the governor was a bad man, but keeping a dead child enslaved went way past her expectations of what he was hiding. Out of pity, she goes to put Penny down, but is interrupted by a frantic Phillip begging and pleading with her to let Penny live.
Don't hurt my little girl.
But Michonne knows Phillip is a sick, sick man and puts Penny down anyway. To me, there are many different reasons why Michonne did this. The obvious one, it was a walker that needed to be put down. Or maybe it was simply revenge on Phillip for tainting Andrea and trying to kill her. But I think the truth lies within Michonne's own backstory. Now, in the show's timeline, we don't discover this until later on after this arc, but Michonne herself had a son, Andre, that she lost in the early days. I don't think it's a stretch to think the real reason she killed Penny was out of mercy for her and her only. She would have put her down with or without Phillip there for the exact same reasons. And I think this really stands as a testament to the complexity of Michonne around this time. One simple action from her can be interpreted in so many ways. Out of pure rage, the governor springs onto Michonne. The fight between the two is bloody and brutal. The governor is a force to be reckoned with in a state of rage, but Michonne is a skilled warrior with a fast-thinking brain. And in self-defense, Michonne uses a piece of glass from the governor's walker tanks to stab him directly through the eye. Michonne goes to deliver the final blow, but is held at gunpoint by Andrea. The governor has truly gone through to Andrea and turned her on her best friend. Michonne knows Andrea isn't strong enough to pull the trigger, so she calls her bluff and walks right out the door. Here, a mutilated Phillip holds his dead daughter in his hands. He doesn't even acknowledge his injuries, as he's already faced the greatest pain he could ever imagine. Phillip is patched up to the best of Woodbury's doctor's abilities, but the loss of his daughter has ignited something vicious inside of him. The governor calls a town meeting at the fighting pits, where he manipulates his people into thinking the attack was unprompted. Once riled up, the governor reveals he has captured one of these terrorists, Daryl Dixon, and by proxy, he publicly accuses Daryl's brother Merle of helping him. Brother versus brother, Phillip demands the two fight to the death. Winner walks free. Allegedly. Merle is a showman and makes a spectacle of beating on his brother, to the cheers of the Woodbury residents, who have been shown to like violence a little too much. But as I mentioned earlier, Merle has always been primarily loyal to his brother, and as Rick and Co double back to help their lost friend, the two fight side by side to escape Woodbury. The governor has just lost his eye, daughter, and most effective lieutenant. Any darkness inside he managed to bury while playing house is about to come to the surface. The immediate aftermath of the search and rescue mission at Woodbury finds Rick and Co arguing about what to do with Merle, as he just spent the last day beating Glenn and torturing Maggie. Glenn refuses to allow him to come back to the prison, and Merle doesn't help as he just taunts Glenn, because he thinks it's funny, I guess. Michonne had made her way back to the group and tries to kill Merle on sight, but is stopped by Rick. Here he reveals to the group Andrea is alive in Woodbury, having survived the winter with Michonne, and is now in bed with the governor. Daryl sides with his brother and chooses to leave and live a life in the woods rather than return to the prison and leave Merle behind once again, despite the oncoming war with their new enemies. Michonne didn't mention her attack on the governor, but being the perceptive cop he is, Rick knows something bad went down between the two, and understands conflict is now inevitable between the two settlements regardless. The day after the attacks, Woodbury is in chaos as residents plead to leave at the gates. The attack the night before has scared them, and they now feel Woodbury is no longer safe. And the worst part, their leader is choosing to lock himself away in his apartment, leaving Andrea to quell the scared crowd. Further reinforcing the residents' fear, walkers have managed to squeeze through the walls, and as a result, one of the innocent residents is eaten alive in front of everyone. And without care or compassion, what once was Phillip coldly walks out of his cave and plants a bullet right into the man's head. This blatantly shows the audience Woodbury's peaceful way of life is about to change permanently, as the signs of a military state are forming. Andrea is now caught between a rock and a hard place, as her old friends have now turned on her and her new friends may not be what she thought. But seeing both sides, Andrea begins to do her best to act as a mediator between the two settlements. Returning to the prison, Rick and Co struggle to recover from what just happened, but know they have to figure out a plan if they're going to survive this conflict. This really couldn't have come at a worse time, as Rick is in a rather fragile place after the recent death of his wife Lori. So when complete strangers find themselves lost inside the prison and are taken into safety by Carl, Rick drives them out after suffering a mental breakdown, giving Rick a bit of a reputation of being a loose cannon out in the wasteland. The strangers, Sasha, Tyrese, Ben, and Alan later find themselves at the gates of Woodbury, where they are greeted by Phillip, with his same old good guy shtick. But with their group having been inside the prison's walls and interacted with its residents, they will prove to be an asset to the governor in the coming conflict. It's clear Phillip is in a spiral of anger and hate, and is taking it out on his town. Now, out on their own, Daryl and Merle find themselves arguing and disagreeing on just about everything. Daryl's time apart from Merle made the best parts of Daryl shine through, to the point where Merle's words don't have the same iron grip on him they used to. After an incident with Merle trying to rob an innocent family, Daryl realizes just how much he's changed since separating from his brother and chooses to go back to his newfound family. Back at the prison, things are tense as Rick continues to lose his mind, hallucinating his dead wife outside the fence. Glenn steps up and takes lead, preparing the prison for a possible attack. It's been a few days since their attack on Woodbury, and things have been quiet, all things considered. Things seem safe enough to even take a small walk out in the open.
One time that summer.
Yeah, in hindsight, they should have been more on edge considering they were expecting an attack. That being said, the Woodbury army, led by the governor himself, fired blindly onto the prison, looking to cause as much panic and damage as possible. As Rick's on the outside, he's actually rescued from walkers by Merle as him and Daryl arrive back at the fences. And for their grand finale, the soldiers crash a truck filled with walkers into the prison yard, leaving the survivors scrambling. This attack sends a clear message to Rick and co. We know where you are, and you are at our mercy. Now at Woodbury, Andrea was left completely in the dark on this attack, so she finds it extremely suspicious when the governor tells her Rick attacked them first while they were trying to negotiate. The governor has even taken it upon himself to begin enlisting kids as young as 15 into his army, a far cry from the peaceful lemonade-drinking town Woodbury was just a few episodes prior. But he masks his madness under the guise of protection for his people. Phillip and Andrea's relationship has been on the rocks since the attack, so it's no surprise that when she asked him about retaliation, Phillip lied and said it was water under the bridge. Obviously, this is all nothing but lies from Phillip, as when Andrea asked to visit her friends in the prison to mediate the anger and broker peace, Phillip tells her not to bother coming back if she does. Now, Andrea is not the kind of person to do what she's told, as we've come to learn, so she goes against Phillip's wishes and requests Milton help her tame a walker so she can get to the prison safely. Once arrived, Andrea is greeted with a cold shoulder from just about everyone at the prison, which she finds unfair as she was the one who was left behind initially. This is even more ironic as she sees Merle has taken up shelter inside the prison as well. The idea of Andrea returning is to broker a peace deal between the two communities, but it's clear the prison isn't going down without a fight after everything that's happened. Carol understands there's only one way this is gonna go and tells Andrea she needs to kill the governor in his sleep if she wants to prove her loyalty. When returning to Woodbury, Andrea seeks out Phillip, who embraces her, believing she has chosen Woodbury as her permanent home, but in reality, she's merely contemplating whether to end Phillip to save her old friends. She turns away with a knife in hand and gets cold feet, believing an option of peace is still on the table, but this is a decision she is going to come to regret very soon. The apocalyptic landscape remains quiet as Rick Grimes walks into an abandoned barn, where he is greeted by the governor himself. Andrea's presence inside Woodbury has caused some issues between the two communities. One thing she manages to do is get Phillip and Rick to agree to a sit down with each other. The two take turns throwing shade as the mood remains tense the entire time. The two come to terms with the fact they are very different leaders and don't see a way of coexisting with each other. But Phillip's intentions of communicating for peace were not false, as he does propose a way for the two settlements to coexist. Deliver Michonne, and he'll leave them alone. This puts Rick into an interesting situation where he has to make the decision himself, whether to sacrifice someone he's come to see as one of their own, or withstand the full force of the governor. It's a classic, the needs of one versus the needs of many argument. Michonne has proven to be quite the asset, but is this enough to risk the lives of his family? Rick confides in Herschel, who insists Michonne has become an asset, Daryl echoing his thoughts. But Rick has seen the brutality of this new world and insists this is the best way of survival. Officer Friendly proves he has gone cold as he enlists Merle to deliver Michonne to the governor.
You're cold as ice, Officer Friendly.
Even Merle thinks this is pretty hardcore, going as far as to tell Rick she won't be killed but repeatedly tortured. But Rick understands and signs off on the mission anyway. And as Merle asks for some help from Michonne in the tombs, he knocks her out and ties her up. Merle, however, is going rogue, and instead of taking Michonne as a group, he heads off back to the meeting spot on his own.
Merle has to be one of the most interesting characters this season. He is never fully on either side. His loyalties lie with Daryl, and Daryl's loyalties lie with the prison. So if it weren't for either factors, Merle would still be Philip's dog, because at the time, Woodbury would still likely be the best means to survival. But since his brother's influence has started to actually rub off on him, he's ready to make it right with those in the prison no matter the cost. Now, out on the road, Merle continues his journey with Michonne bound. But along the way, he kind of has an epiphany, realizing Michonne is just as much an outsider as he is, and actually sets her free to head back to the prison, under the impression this was his idea and his only. Daryl's new moral code has really gone through to him. Getting drunk, Merle then spends the next hour leading a pack of walkers in a car to the meeting spot where he was supposed to deliver Michonne. The governor's men were prepared for an ambush, so the trade wouldn't have worked anyway, and Merle knows it. Here, a gunfight breaks out, with the Woodbury soldiers taking out walkers, while Merle picks them off one by one from a distance. This could only last so long, however, as Philip quickly tracks him down and starts a bloody fight. Quickly overpowering the one-handed Merle, Philip bites off 2 of his remaining fingers, leaving Merle beat. He tells Philip,
I ain't gonna beg. I ain't begging you.
But Philip wasn't asking him to.
No.
Daryl uses his tracking skills to find Merle's now turned body. The only person who ever cared about him is the one who has to put him down. This war has now caused another casualty for the prison, and everyone knows it's only a matter of time. Merle was a confusing man, to say the least. What appears to be nothing more than a redneck racist later turns into one of the more complex characters of the series. He flip-flops between sides, but unlike some characters later on in the series, his actions all make sense in the context of the overall story. His loyalty lied with his brother. When separated, he sided with some bad people, but when reunited, he immediately sides with Daryl until the very end. This isn't to say Merle is all of a sudden a good person. No, he's still the racist, sexist man he was at the start. But this sense of morality is what interests me the most, like how he let Michonne go, even though he had no real strategic reason to. One of my favorite Merle scenes comes when he is in the prison. Herschel attempts to change his way of thinking by reciting a Bible verse, but instead of blowing him off, Merle finishes the verse. This small scene shows us we truly know nothing about Merle or his moral code. He's one of the more interesting personalities in these earlier seasons, and I think he honestly gets the exact amount of screen time he needed. Now, back in Woodbury, things have gone dark, as the town has fully turned into a military state, as Philip has returned with bloodlust in his eyes after Rick's little attempt on his life using Merle. Milton asks to show Andrea something, where he then leads her to a vent, where the two watch as Philip constructs a torture chamber. Filled with chains and various equipments to inflict pain, it doesn't take a genius to realize this room is meant for Michonne. Philip has gone psychotic, and Andrea knows she can't stay here any longer. Milton agrees, promising to cover for her as long as he can while she warns the prison. The governor is coming. What we see next is the governor in his true form, a monster hunting what he believes is his. Through fields and up corridors, the governor chases Andrea down, taunting her like some deranged supervillain the entire time. She manages to escape and finally finds herself at the prison fences before the governor stops her and takes her back where she belongs. Andrea now finds herself at Philip's mercy in the same torture chambers that was meant for Michonne. Philip keeps this a secret from the masses, but baits Milton into believing he's unaware of his treason. But not for long, as in a matter of time, Philip is beating him for information as well in the same torture room. Philip demands Milton be the one to kill Andrea, and when he picks up the tools to do it, he turns on the governor, attempting to end all the pain right then and there, but instead, he's the one to face the ultimate pain, as Philip plunges the blade deep inside his stomach. And whether he likes it or not, he will kill Andrea, one way or another. Philip tells her he's going to kill everyone at the prison, and she's powerless to stop him.
Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind?
The governor begins assembling the troops as they prepare to attack the prison. Sasha and Tyrese are clearly uncomfortable with the state of Woodbury, so when the soldiers head out, they discuss taking some of the older people and kids with them and getting out of there, showing us that the regular citizens of Woodbury are just as uncomfortable with what's going on as anyone. I guess it goes to show for the Woodbury residents that when things get real, their anger and bloodlust quickly turns into fear. Arriving at the prison for the final assault, the Woodbury soldiers fire grenades onto the watchtowers and mow down the walkers in the field. Quickly, the governor and his soldiers begin storming the halls of the prison as they know the layout from Sasha and Tyrese. But to their shock, nobody's home. At least that's what they thought. You see, the prison gang learned from their mistake of letting their guard down and were fully prepared for this assault. So when the governor's troops are ambushed, they begin to scatter outside the prison. As they flee, Rick decides he wants to push on them and finish this once and for all. As the soldiers pile down the highway, retreating back to Woodbury, the governor stops them in the road and demands they get back there and finish the job. The Woodbury residents stand their ground and refuse to fight, triggering something inside Phillip as he begins unloading bullets onto his own people. The remaining lieutenants stare in shock as Phillip coldly shoots Alan, who showed resistance, marking their own fates if they choose to turn on him as well. In silence, Phillip gets in the truck and drives off away from what just happened, and Woodbury, the town he built, at the end of the world. Rick and Co. come across the massacre site where the lone survivor Karen explains what the governor did while in shock. Pushing up to Woodbury, Karen alerts Tyrese and Sasha about what happened. They tell Rick that Andrea set out for the prison days ago, and since she never arrived, she must be here in Woodbury. Stealthily moving through the corridors, Rick and Michonne find her on the floor, bit by the turned Milton. Andrea confesses in her dying breath that she never wanted any of this to happen, but Rick now understands the kind of position Andrea was in and tells her she is still one of them. Michonne decides to stay with Andrea as Rick gives her his gun.
I know how the safety works.
And as they wait outside the door, the halls are filled with the sound of Rick's python firing. Andrea's actions may have been misguided when she first arrived at Woodbury, but giving the benefit of the doubt, she did try her best to prevent conflict. And when finding out who Phillip truly was, she tried to go back to her friends in the prison. Her character always gets a bad rap, and I think it stems from her hooking up with Phillip. But in reality, she just fell for the same charm the other 70 people in Woodbury did. The only thing she really did wrong in my eyes was not following Michonne out the gates. Everything else within her own context was pretty reasonable, and she went out trying to right the wrongs. But Michonne said it best herself. You chose a warm bed over a friend. And she's right. But Andrea ended up paying for that mistake with her life in the end anyway. But that doesn't mean it wasn't just as annoying to watch her hold a gun to Michonne regardless. Her efforts to prevent war weren't in vain, however, as Rick agrees to take in the remaining residents of Woodbury to live at the prison as one of them, as their leadership has abandoned them and has no sign of returning. And if they did, who would want them anyway? The sacrifices made during this arc would ensure the prison would go on to survive, at least for a while. That is the story of the governor. After murdering his own people, he disappears into the wasteland, never to be seen again. Wait, what? There's still more? Many months passed as Phillip wandered the wasteland alone. After being left by his remaining men in the dead of night, Phillip was left with truly nothing. Out of rage, he smashed through the gates of Woodbury and set the town ablaze. From there, he became the Walking Dead, as he would simply wander from place to place with no destination in mind. With his beard grown out and hair unkept, Phillip had lost any semblance of himself. Reflecting on his life, he walks past a barn with many messages written on it, most for someone named Brian Harriet. Phillip had wondered, if things had been different and his family survived, would they have waited for him like Brian? But none of that matters now, as Phillip is alone and purposeless. That is, until he stumbles into the lives of two sisters, Lily and Tara, along with Lily's daughter Megan and their sick father. Collapsing from exhaustion in the street, the sisters bring the unconscious Phillip into their apartment. The two are stern at first, but lighten up after Phillip introduces himself to them as Brian Harriet. This name change reflects on Phillip's current state of mind, as not only does he crave what he could have had, what Brian Harriet had, but he seems to disavow his old self. Over the next couple days, Phillip spends time getting to know the family, and especially the young daughter Megan, who very clearly and blatantly is meant to remind him of his daughter Penny, allowing Phillip's more humane side to show, telling Megan about his family and the good memories they had, while Lily listens in the other room. Lily and Tara's father is sick and needs an oxygen tank from a nearby hospital. As Phillip is looking for a purpose again, he agrees to retrieve it. He gets back and the family is thankful. Lily cleans up Phillip while Megan watches. Feeling open enough, he jokes about being a pirate when asked how he got the eye patch.
I'm a pirate.
No way.
But when he gets on a serious note, he tells them that he lost it protecting his now dead family. This makes Lily start to fall for him. Later that night, Phillip plays chess with Megan as Lily reveals her father had passed away despite the oxygen tanks. When he reanimated, he nearly bites Tara, but is brutally put down by Phillip. Realizing they can't stay here anymore, Lily begs to leave with Phillip, where they all then set out into the wasteland. Lily and Phillip become extremely close and eventually hook up on the road. Phillip has now found a new purpose to live, and he will now do anything to keep them safe. But most importantly, keep Megan safe, as all he's ever wanted was a second chance at being a father. So when they are overrun by walkers, Phillip picks up Megan and runs without looking back. While running through a clearing, Phillip and Megan fall into a pit that looks suspiciously like the ones they used to use at Woodbury to capture walkers. Phillip fights off the dead in the pit while Megan watches in terror. He overcomes the threat and tells Megan he will keep her safe no matter what. And when he looks up, Martinez, one of Phillip's lieutenants at Woodbury, is staring back down at him in shock. When getting out of the pit, Martinez tells Phillip he's welcome to join their group as long as Phillip understands he's in charge. Martinez knows who Phillip truly is, so when Lily comes out of the trees calling him Brian, he knows Phillip is still up to the same old shady shit he was up to in Woodbury. They take shelter in their nearby camp, along with at least 20 other survivors. Oh yeah, and a tank. Owned by an ex-military soldier who definitely knows how to use it. Lily, Tara, and Phillip all find ways to make themselves useful inside the camp and get to know their fellow survivors. Tara finding herself a girlfriend, and Lily creating a makeshift nurse station, while Phillip assists on supply runs. Martinez begins to trust Phillip again despite their history and invites him to play a little golf on top of one of the old vehicles, like the good old days. Here he confesses Schumpert, one of Phillip's other lieutenants, had been bitten shortly after they left him. He had to be the one to put him down, so he tries to relate to Phillip on having to do the hard thing as a leader to protect the ones you love. Phillip couldn't agree more, as we see him bash Martinez over the head with one of the clubs and feed him to the dead. Phillip has positioned himself to be able to grow in power within the camp, as he makes it seem like Martinez fell in after drinking too much. This murder clearly affects Phillip on a personal level, as we see him actually crying and shaking afterwards. I think this is to show us Phillip really is scared of himself and what he's capable of doing, but knows he has to keep the ones he loves alive. So when the camp's second in command, Pete, takes power, Phillip stabs him in the back as well. Literally. Phillip straight up confesses to the murder to Mitch, the tank operator, who actually kind of understands where Phillip is coming from, as he believed Pete wouldn't be able to keep them alive either. With the manpower now on his side, Phillip quickly takes control over the camp, and establishes inventory counts and perimeter watches. But this would prove to be too little too late, as Megan would be chased by a walker while playing tag. Phillip takes it out before it can hurt her, but this shows them all that no matter how many people they have on guard, a camp out in the open like this could never be safe. So this begins to turn Phillip's eyes onto the prison. As he stands in the tree line, watching Rick and Carl as they plant crops, building what they think could be their future. But Phillip can't let go of the past. He can't let go of Woodbury or Andrea. So when Michonne and Herschel are out in the woods doing menial tasks, the last person they expected to see jump them was the governor. Tying them up and bringing them back to his camp, Phillip tells the two of his plan to take the prison without firing a shot, using them as hostages. Herschel pleads with Phillip as the two can relate on having daughters, but Phillip coldly and sternly says he only cares for his own. Lily is uncomfortable with the thought of attacking others for a home, acting as the voice of the camp's people, but Phillip's charm assures her the hostages situation will work, and they will take the prison peacefully. The time has come. Masking the attack as a necessity for survival, but in reality, it's strictly revenge for all that happened nearly a year ago. Megan and Lily stay back as the entire rest of the camp march onto the prison's fences. Announcing their arrival, they use the tank to blow up one of the prison towers. Something that's become a habit of Phillip, I guess. As he stands on the tank, with Michonne and Herschel bound on their knees, Phillip demands Rick come down to talk. Complying, Rick is told to pack up and leave, plainly and simply. Of course, that's not going to happen without a fight, and they both know it. But Rick pleads and begs for the governor to reconsider. In response, he holds Michonne's katana to Herschel's neck. All the rage and pain Phillip has been through has led to this deciding moment. Could he lay down his weapon and actually become one of them? That is what Rick asked Phillip in his time of desperation.
Let go of all of it. And nobody dies.
Liar.
Michonne watches as Herschel falls beside her. Bullets begin flying on all sides as the governor's forces begin taking down the fences. It is here Lily appears at the battlefield with a dead Megan in her arms. Phillip has failed to protect a daughter once again. He puts a bullet in her head. But symbolically, I think it's supposed to represent him accepting his own death, as his mission turns from getting a new home to leaving it in rubble. With Phillip on the front lines, the soldiers push in as the tank fires on the stronghold. Rick takes the opportunity to get the jump on the governor as the two begin to fight to the death. As the prison falls around them, Phillip has the upper hand on Rick. And as it looks like it is the end, Michonne comes in for the kill. There Phillip lies bleeding on the ground, a direct consequence of not being able to let go of the past. He may have gotten his revenge on the prison, but just like he figured when putting Megan down, he would not walk out of this battlefield with his life. The prison burns as the survivors flee from both sides. The attack has left it utterly unlivable as hundreds of walkers pour in from every side. The sacrifices Andrea made couldn't hold peace forever. Phillip gasped for air in the field as the dead march past him. Thoughts of regret most likely flow through his head as he watches Rick and Michonne walk away with their lives. And as the light begins to fade from his eyes, Phillip watches as Lily approaches him, gun drawn. And like how he treated so many people, Phillip is put down like a dog. The governor is dead, and the prison lays in ruin. The aftermath of the Governor arc may have the most impactful consequences of any arc in the series. The prison is destroyed, which means our heroes are sent out into the wasteland separated, pushing them closer towards Terminus and eventually Negan. Tara survives the battle and watches as Lily is eaten alive off screen. While the lasting trauma will stay with everyone who was unlucky enough to come into contact with Phillip Blake, it may stick with Michonne the most out of anyone. If Merle hadn't let her go, Phillip would have done horrific things to her. Andrea's memory will live on throughout Michonne, Rick, and Daryl as the series continues, and we actually have Andrea to thank for giving us the character Michonne would become later on, by bringing her out of the darkness. Phillip Blake was a sadistic man. He may have come off as simply troubled or fearful of his own actions, but don't be fooled. The governor is a master manipulator. The loss of his wife and daughter only brought to the surface the evil that was already within. Thank you so much for watching, folks. Wow, this took a long time to make. I expected this video to be long, but definitely not this long, so if you made it to the end, I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for 1,000 subscribers. I want to do my best to try to keep a consistent schedule, but working full-time as I do, and producing videos this long, it's hard to get them out in a timely fashion, so please bear with me. Anyway, thank you for watching, and Merry Christmas.